Before we begin, we just want to share a few housekeeping items. My name is Kristen Hess, and I'm the Director of Human Animal Care Center, and I also am on the Executive Committee with HASS. And so today we're going to be trying to get through as many of your questions as we can, and we've gotten some really great questions submitted to us. We are going to ask you to continue to send questions through the time, and we'll prioritize questions as they come in. There's likely going to be more than we can answer, but we'll answer as many as we can get to during the time. So this is your time to ask any questions that you want, and we'll also be touching on a lot of questions that were submitted before the webcast. If you don't get an answer to your question during this time, we'll go back through the questions and attempt to answer all of them and update, provide an updated list via our social platforms. So we are excited to get started. And before we do, we just want to introduce all the people who will be speaking with you today. So I already told you who I am. I'm Kristen, and we'll turn it over now to Gina.
Hi, I'm Gina Knapp. I'm with the Michelson Found Animals Foundation, and I sit on the executive committee for HASS as well. Happy to be here and glad you all joined us.
Great. Diaz?
Hi, I'm Diaz Dixon. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Eddie House, which is a transformational youth homeless shelter in Reno, Nevada, part of the HASS community as well, and happy to be here.
And Dr. Jefferson?
Hi, I'm Ellen Jefferson, and I am the Executive Director of Austin Pets Alive and American Pets Alive, and on the executive team of HASS. Really excited to talk with you tonight.
And Bobby?
Hi everyone, my name is Bobbymann. I'm the Maddie's HASS Pilot Implementation Director. Super excited to be here and answer all of your questions today.
Great, and we also have Rory with us. Rory?
Hi, I am Rory, and I am here as a part of the HASS team. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we are going to get right to the questions. Before we do, we just want to share a quick update about where the project is at, because it's likely you've heard about Human Animal Support Services if you're joining us, but you may not know the current status of this project, which began at the beginning of COVID. So Bobby's going to share a couple of slides with you that just gives you an overall picture, if you're not familiar with the project, about what the heck we have been up to. Okay, so now this is the organizational chart for the entire project. And you might be saying, I can't read anything on here. It's too small. And it's because we're trying to fit so much information into one page. So we're just going to give you a very quick overview. Bobby, do you want to do this or should I?
Sure, I'm happy to help. I know it seems like a lot, but it's actually broken up to some pretty cool pillars that we want to showcase to you. So obviously at the top of this, you see the Human Animal Support Services along with our executive committee, which you see here. You see our tier 1 shelters here over to the left. These are all of our shelters that are a part of the HASS project that are really invested, going all in. We have 19 tier 1 shelters that we're doing a heavy lift with. Not only are their employees a part of our working groups, which we'll talk about shortly, we're also doing a deep dive into research and data regarding these groups. Also, you'll see the tier 2 shelters at the bottom here. Oftentimes people like to ask, what's the difference between a tier 1 and a tier 2 shelter? The primary difference is the time level and the level of bandwidth that they can put into this. As Kristen likes to say, the tier 2 are really dipping their feet in the water because they might not be able to implement all of the elements that we're going to talk about shortly, but they're very invested in the values and the mission of HASS, and they're all working together to help self-implement a lot of the things that we're doing about HASS. And the goal of that is to really show the scalability of a lot of the programmatic change we're trying to present. In the center of HASS, you really see the foundation of what we're trying to accomplish, which is the elements of HASS. We'll share a link to our website, which does a much deeper dive into what all of these elements mean. They're either tools, programs, tactics, or strategies that are really helping shift the energy into community-based sheltering versus the shelter being the center of gravity. On the right-hand side, you really see where a lot of the magic happens within HASS. So these are 35 individual working groups, which we'll discuss a bit later on as well, of industry professionals that have come together. We have over 520 people working on the HASS project collectively that are subject experts in certain genres of what we do, whether it's wildlife, marketing communications, ecosystems, grassroots rollouts, disaster response, and they've all come together to try to solve industry problems, as well as help our tier 1 shelters with the heavy lift of all of this implementation that they're doing. Kristen, is there anything else you wanted to share about this graph?
No, let's show everybody the map.
Cool. I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment.
So we're about to pull up a map where you can kind of see the shelters are distributed around the US. So this gives you an idea of where the different shelters are.
Yep, and in their hearts, because this makes all of our hearts so happy. As you can see, we're not only in the United States, but Canada as well. Many of these shelters are large, small, municipal, nonprofit with government contracts. And the goal of having a diverse group of shelters is really because we know that there's not one roadmap. There's so much gray in what we do. It's never black and white. So we're hoping through this HASS project that many shelters around the country will have a shelter that they can closely emulate when they're trying to implement these strategies in the future as well.
Thank you so much. So that is the scope of the HASS project. We have over 600 experts in animal welfare involved in the project, and we're so excited about where we're going. And as always, anytime we change anything about a system that has existed for more than 150 years, we're going to create new challenges, and this project is no exception. We recognize and sort of welcome the new challenges brought on by trying to do more sheltering within the community and trying to institutionalize fewer pets with the goal of keeping more pets in their homes and communities and housing the animals that do come in primarily in foster homes versus bringing them all into the shelter. So we're here today to talk about the successes, what we have to look forward, and all of the challenges these new questions have brought. So I want to begin with a question to Diaz. Diaz, people may wonder, what the heck is the connection between animal sheltering and social services? You run an agency that serves homeless young people. And so how does that, what brought you here and how does that work intersect?
Well, Kristen, and I'm sure that that's going through the minds of many people. And I did work in the animal welfare industry for a while. And one of the things that I noticed working in social services and then going to the animal welfare world and then coming back into the social service world, there are so many connections. And particularly right now, things have been really rough in the United States. You know, we have a lot of division that's going on. We have a really poor economy. We have people on the verge of being kicked out of their homes. Homelessness is growing, as well as suicide, depression, amongst many other things, domestic violence. One of the things that really brings us together that we know is that pets are an integral part of our families. And a number of people who are going through difficult times are finding it hard to leave their situations or separate from their animals. And those are the things that are, that companionship and that emotional support are the things that keep us moving forward. And bringing these two worlds together, it is a win-win on both sides. When we're looking at a lot of the homeless youth that are in our programs, they have pets, and us taking the necessary steps and keeping the pets ingrained in their lives is something that keeps them moving forward and having hope and having faith. And at the same time, it gives the animals a safe place to be rather than going back into shelters. The cost of healthcare alone is always multiplied with depression, anxiety, and those are the things that are brought about. So the wonderful thing about this program with HASS, it gives us an opportunity to look at how to have solutions that come from both the four-legged and two-legged world as we merge it together. And it's super exciting when we know that if we can stretch outside of the box that we normally put ourselves in and step outside the silos, that there's a lot of wonderful work to be done.
Thank you so much, Diaz. And just as an aside, since we have most people have joined, I just want to mention that this is not our complete executive committee. We're missing two really important members. Lisa LaFontaine and Chetan Amural are both on the EC. Neither could be here today due to pretty serious family emergency. So they both apologized and said that they will have to do another one soon so that they can be part of it. Moving on now, Dr. Jefferson, do you have a pre-submitted audience question?
Yes, I do. This question is for Gina, and the question is, what sets HASS apart from other outreach initiatives?
You're muted.
Of course I am. We're gonna come up with a new word for unmuted in real life someday. There are a lot of good programs out there, but I think HASS encompasses the totality of the community and really digs deeply into the kind of the root cause. Why do animals come into animal shelters to begin with? Why are people having to give up their animals? What can we do organizationally to prevent that from happening? I think the human animal bond is at the basis of everything we do, and a real kind of a deep dive into socioeconomics, demographics, where are the needs the greatest, and how can the shelter remove itself from, Lisa LaFontaine always says, from the center of gravity and move the work that we do day in and day out into our communities on a full-time, regular, forever basis. I think that's what makes HASS different. It's not a project. It's a reimagining or reinvention of animal sheltering that hopefully, and that we'll see in our lifetime, a real shift in how we do business and how we serve the pets that need our help, whether they're in the shelter or not, and the people that love them. I don't know, am I right, Dr. Jefferson? Help me out here.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And I was thinking about maybe why these things haven't been as connected in the past, where you have outreach or animal sheltering. And I think honestly, COVID has brought them together, and we finally have the chance to work on them together. It's really exciting.
So Gina, we talk a lot about needing to address the places that animal welfare is really failing. I mean, I think that there's this widespread agreement that we're not doing as well as we could, and you've been a really vocal advocate for doing a better job with returning animals home. And you remind us on almost every meeting how important that is. Can you talk a little bit about how we as a movement could be doing so much better when it comes to lost and found?
Sure. Well, I retired from Front Street Animal Shelter, God, October 11th will be a year already. I can't believe it. And when I was there, RTO was a big piece of the heart of the work that we did. And I felt very strongly that as an industry, we haven't devoted enough time, energy, technology into getting pets back home where they belong. I mean, most of them that come to us really do belong to someone. So I went to work for Michelson, and my sole strategy, my sole purpose in life is increasing the RTO rate. And COVID will probably, I'll probably lose my job because of COVID, because COVID made RTO a thing. And it's again, our responsibility as animal welfare professionals to find missing people and not waiting for them to come to us. And there are so many brilliant, amazing strategies, techniques, programs, technology out there that can help us get pets back home. And I think it should be the number one thing we do. I mean, I know why we've done the whole, what's it called? You know, when you move an animal quickly through the system, getting placement quickly, instead of, you know, and getting that animal either to rescue, transfer to another organization, or adopted quickly. And instead, we need to put on the brakes a little bit and work more heavily toward finding out where did that animal come from? How do we reunite it with its family? And if they need something to help them keep their pet, providing whatever that is, to keep people and their pets together. Like Diaz says, pets are family. And I do preach about it a lot, and I'm happy to talk to anybody offline on this topic. I have lots of ideas.
Great. I have another question here for Bobby. How will rescues be able to get dogs once they are almost all in foster and spread out in many locations?
You know, Dr. Jefferson, that's such a good question, because I think it touches on many components. One, how we are really utilizing technology through HASS to be more innovative and support animals. And two, really the change that's happening in the industry and how we want to be receptive and respectful to people that are going through that change. You know, many people in the rescue world have been coming to shelters for the last 10, 20, 30 years with the sole purpose of helping us lift our communities and support more animals. And as this innovation has come, and you know, there is a mindset of it's better to keep animals out of shelters, people might worry, like, what is my purpose? Where do I stand? And I think there's two things. One, there's going to be so many ways for rescues to be able to support us in innovative programs. But two, what a great way to really be able to understand how a pet is going to do in a home, right? So through fostering, through technology, rescue groups are going to be able to not only work with shelters, but they're going to be able to talk to foster parents about an animal, about their behavior outside of the shelter, have a better understanding of their background, potentially get better pictures. And I think that's really going to lead to better outcomes, not only for that pet, but more information for these rescue groups as well. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're always going to need help. Shelters are not going out of business. There will always be displaced animals that need support. And if it wasn't for rescues, we wouldn't be where we are today. And we're not going to be able to do what we want to do without their help. So I'm excited for this partnership.
Thanks, Bobby. Okay, Dr. Jefferson, this is the big, we get so much positive responses, and I think the project growth is a sign of how much people are sort of joining this and feeling like it's the right way to go. But it is a fundamental transition in the way that we serve people and animals in our community. And some of the critics of HASS would say that you need to just take in every single animal that comes to the door should have a place to go. And it doesn't, if you get full, you get full. It's really about the animals. It's not really about the people. So I want to ask you, and then maybe turn to Diaz, what's your response to that criticism?
I think that it is a pretty narrow approach to what we're trying to do, what sheltering can do, and the potential that we all have in making the sheltering world better. The shelter has served as that catch-all for the community for every animal problem that exists. And we're recognizing that if we care about the animals, that's not the best solution. And so if animals are the priority, we should be looking for better solutions than the current situation, regardless of live release rates and how nice shelters are. We recognize that we could do better. We can do a lot better. And I think that something that we're not talking about that is really important for us to start talking about when we're talking about the animals only and really separating them, thinking about them separate from their people, is that animals also have a strong bond to their people. It's not just the people's bond to the pet. And so when we separate an animal from its person, we see all sorts of crazy things happen. And I know that there's a higher incidence of separation anxiety in shelter-placed dogs. And I think we really need to ask ourselves, are we the ones creating that by not trying to find their owner and not actually doing our due diligence to get them back home to begin with, putting them in a really, what in some dogs' purview, a really stressful situation that just exacerbates their anxiety and their need to kind of do anything that they can to find their person. And I think that we have an opportunity to really reflect on everything that we've done up to this point, and that's what HASS is doing. And that's where I think the benefit of us all coming together and all recognizing that we could do better is just an amazing achievement in animal welfare, because together we can create the future that we want for animals and for people. And I think that relying on the old system is not the way to go in this moment of tremendous opportunity to make systemic change.
And for me to piggyback on what Dr. J so eloquently said, it's really important for us to have an individualized approach, figuring out how we can cater more to the needs of those particular animals and those particular families. In the human world, it's never good for us to grab adopted kids or grab kids that are in the foster care system and just throw them in a place just because there's an opening. We really have to do some real strong evaluation to make sure that it's a good fit. If people can go back to a healthy situation with their families, and that's wonderful to be able to give a family support and allow that to come in. And we need to mitigate all of the issues that are around the problems that I think that we have created over time, because we have done it. This is the way we've always done it. This is the way we continue to do it. We know as animal lovers that they all have unique personalities. We know that they're very different. There's no lump cookie stamp, cookie cutter stamp that we can put on cats or put on dogs or small animals, whatever it may be. So why would our approaches dictate that we do the same thing? So the challenge and the wonderful conversations that we're having at HASS is how do we look deeper into providing different categories and evaluations with such methodologies, and opening up to some creative minds and thinking to have much better outcomes that are going to be lasting outcomes, and reduce the recidivism rates that we have of animals coming back or just being simply unhappy.
Thank you both.
Yeah, I'll ask another question from the public from our pre-submitted questions. And this is similar to what Gina just answered. So maybe, hopefully this will be a new answer, and I think it will. The focus on RTO is gaining traction, but it feels like there is a big push to have people who find lost animals do the work previously done by the shelter. How will shelters maintain control of ensuring pets are spayed, neutered, licensed, etc.?
You want me to tackle that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think first of all, we need to acknowledge that and I say this for all of us, that we're foolish if we think people haven't been finding and reuniting lost pets without us forever. I mean, truly, shelters only touch a fraction of the animals in our communities, just a tiny, tiny fraction. And I think working with our public, with that well-intentioned person who finds a dog or a cat, and giving them all the suggestions and tools that they need to find the owner, which based on the studies that have come out so far in the last 6 months, the private person has a higher RTO rate than we do, because typically that animal isn't far from home versus having been driven, 12, 20 miles to the shelter. So working with that person will allow us to have conversations, I think, with that owner, either via that person or through the shelter's involvement, about spaying and neutering on a very, in a more helpful way, about microchipping, about making sure dogs and cats have ID tags on them. We're facilitating a reunion because we want pets and people to stay together. And I think it opens doors for us to be even more helpful to pet owners, going that route versus the strong arm, the enforcement methodology that many of us have used for a very long time. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I want to spend just an extra minute on this question because it's a really important one, and it gets to the heart of this question about what should our expectation of the community be. And I think that what we know is that when animals are taken out of their communities and neighborhoods and they're driven miles and miles to a shelter, that they're less likely to get home, and they are more likely to lose their lives in the shelter. And depending on what shelter that is, it can really be life and death for an animal, whether it goes to the shelter. And that's not always true, but HASS is really asking ourselves, how can we partner with the people in communities who already are looking for a way to help? How can we ask people to help, make it really easy for them, and then be that safety net? If they say, no, I can't do it, I need to bring the animal in, continue to be that safety net. So at the shelter that I manage, we typically would take in about 8,600 animals by this time of year. And thanks to the HASS programs, we've only taken in about 6,500. And the vast majority of those have been housed in foster homes. But why that matters is because we're in no way saying that you just turn your backs on the animals and they stay in the street. We're saying that we need to take a case management approach to each situation, consider the individual needs and options for every animal, and that some of those animals are going to come into the shelter and be institutionalized, but many won't need to be. They'll actually be able to stay in their homes and communities. So it's a more balanced approach to seeing the problem, and it really follows in line. I want to turn back to Diaz because I think it follows in line with the moves that have been made when it comes to human childcare and human social work, where we're actually engaging people to be part of the solutions. We're not just saying, we're going to take you out of your home and we're going to deal with it, and that's it. Is that right, Diaz?
That is, you're 100% correct on that, Kristen. You know, it gives people and people from the outside. If we're looking at this from the outside world of people who don't necessarily understand animal welfare, it's going to open up doors for people to listen more. People are going to be willing to dive in. I also firmly believe that there are going to be more donors on the outside that say, okay, hey, wait a minute, because there are plenty of donors outside this industry who have pets that they love. And when they see us recognizing and giving a more family approach to the services in which we provide, it's going to pull them in. It's not a tough sell. And I know that I'm going a little bit off topic there, Kristen, but it's important for us to understand that when we're doing this with people, these are the things that we're taking into consideration. So let's remember, these are a part of all of us feel like these are a part of our family. They are family members. So let's make that shift.
Thank you. So we have a question in the chat from Ed Box. Hi, Ed. It's good to see you, or see you in our chat. He asked, what resources and tools does HASS provide? So I think anyone on this executive committee can answer that.
So I can start the conversation on that. We are currently sharing some of the programs that are coming out of the tier ones. Those are, we've had each of the tier one shelters, or almost all the tier one shelters, do a mini presentation on where they are now, and those will be shared on our website. Hopefully this week, and you'll be able to see what they're doing. The tools and resources are things that we're building out over time. And so the working groups are coming together. Everybody who's working on the working groups are helping to build out that resource toolkit, if you will, because it doesn't exist. And I think that's what a lot of people are not comprehending about the HASS project, is that this is truly a design, build, and then implement project, not a turnkey project. Here's your marching orders and go do them. And so the great thing about that, the bad thing about that is it takes a little while. The great thing about that is that we are, we're building this with a lot of input and a lot of varying voices, and we are welcoming more every day. There's new people entering the working groups every single day so that we have as many voices captured as possible. And every working group is starting with a why statement. Why do we need to examine this issue? And also, why do we, and how are we going to go about this? What are our guiding principles that are leading us to build this the way that we're building it? And then we'll have solutions to the problems that we've articulated. And so I think that it'll be a really robust set of tools. And as we grow our working groups, like the grassroots rollout working group and the marketing and communications working group, will be sharing snippets of this as we go, so that we're not all having to wait until the end products are finished, because there's just amazing conversations happening all day, every day. And it's really exciting to watch.
Yeah, and to echo Dr. Jefferson, there's so much work being done behind the scenes on the list of the working groups that we just shared in the chat. And I think one thing that we've really been doing is focusing on listening more so than trying to churn out product immediately. I know in our industry, we always have such a sense of urgency because there are always lives at stake. But we've also been really trying to be diverse in the voices that are brought into this. So it could be people from social services or public health, bringing in experts like Diaz. And one of the things that we have learned from this, as well as people that are really looking at this through a diversity, equity, inclusion lens, is that, you know, you have to be mindful in the work that you're doing, and you can't rush to do it because then you're not going to be really doing it in the way that's going to best benefit the communities that need it the most. So we are going to, like Dr. J said, continue to sprinkle the work throughout. There's going to be a lot of platforms, which we'll talk about probably a little later on, where you can get the information about what working groups are doing. But we like to say, just trust the process, and we can't wait to show you the great work that's happening.
Yeah, thank you both. So we have another question, and just before we get to that, we just want to mention that the existing system, so much innovation has happened in sheltering, and we're really learning from a lot of that. So many cool things have happened all over the country, and the people leading the working groups are doing that. And when you go back to the roots of animal sheltering and the pound system, what you find, I mentioned before that we're moving towards a more balanced, moderate approach to animal welfare. And what I mean is that the pound model was actually really radical because it required the complete separation of the animal from its home, family, and community in order to serve that animal. And even in really good shelters, we still find the norm is that that animal has to be completely and forever removed from its owner or from its finder, and that that person can't be help be a safety net for that animal. And so part of this project is really just changing that to keep animals connected to as many people in the community as we can so that we build safety nets under them. And for animals with medical and behavioral challenges, any one of 10 people in that safety net could eventually save the animal's life. So moving on to another tough question we received, there continues to be concern over the belief that shelters are turning away stray animals, particularly dogs. HASS organizations may not be doing this, but other shelters are, and they point to HASS as the rationale for doing so. What can you do to correct this problem?
Is that for me? So what we're working on for that is, it's a really complicated issue because the way that animal shelters softwares are built out is that they measure intakes and outcomes and everything that happens to the animal from the point of intake and the point of outcome. And there's not a lot else that they measure. And so we're working with a database system that doesn't allow any shelter to pull metrics that are easily shared and really point to the work that they're doing in the community. And that is front and center in our minds as we're trying to build out the metrics that will help to define success for what HASS is trying to do. And so with the specifically with trying to create lost and found programs, and lost and found programs that don't require a shelter kennel, that is going to require different metrics that are put into the database so that then they can be captured in a report at the end of a period of time, like a month or 6 months or whatever. And we've identified that there are 3 things that we know we need to measure at a very high level. If you think of it as what the director needs to know that their organization is doing a good job, this is also probably the same information that the public needs to know that the shelter is doing a good job if the animals aren't coming into the shelter and they're strays. And those 3 things are measuring that measuring how many are not coming in, measuring what's happening to those animals. Are they in a safe situation? Kind of assessing the safety of the situation, the safety of the human and the safety of the animal that has been found. And maybe that's providing a score. We're not really sure yet, but somehow measuring the safety. And then we also need to measure the community satisfaction. There's a lot of concern that people are going to be put in a situation where they are having to take on this burden for the shelter when the shelter used to do it. And I think that we need to be cognizant that that is a concern. And so we need to somehow be able to measure the community's willingness to participate or the satisfaction they have with the service that they received, and then build that metric system that can then be captured in a database. And all of the tier 1 cities are interested in doing that. We're working with each one of them to build out that high level director's report. And then at the lower levels below the director and the manager roles and the sub-director roles, those are metrics that we're also working on so that we can at least start measuring in more detail the outcomes of field services calls and the interactions that are taking place, and again, the outcome of the animal, and again, the satisfaction of the person, but more than that even, and trying to really get that down on paper right now. And several of the working groups are putting their heads together and trying to make that happen. And so hopefully we'll be able to share those as we go, but I think it's important to know that we are changing every fiber of the industry. It's not a quick plug and play, and it's going to take work and it's going to take time.
We're all of us tier 1 shelters, we're piloting these programs. And so we are really trying to figure out how the community wants to help. And about half of the people, when we ask people if they're willing to help hold a stray dog, we're not just asking them to hold that stray dog. We're right away getting online. We're helping find, do we have a microchip? Can we get the pet skinned? Is there licensing? If not, did someone file a found report? And we're going to work as doggy detectives from the beginning. And what that does is it helps people feel supported. And then we ask people if they can hold the dog for a few hours, a couple of days, or longer term. And so we give people a number of options based on how they want to help. And about half the people, they don't really want to help yet. About half of them do though, and they can hold the dog for some amount of time. And so when you start to add up those numbers in a high volume shelter like mine that takes in 20,000 animals a year, those numbers really add up, and those are animals that we can keep out. And someone asked a question about special medical and behavioral needs animals. What's really happened for us is because we're able to keep some animals in homes and communities and not come into the shelter, we're able to give more time per day to the animals with special medical and behavioral needs. And our save rate has actually increased since COVID because we're housing fewer animals here, and we can give them more. And that's the goal, is that every animal gets more, and that this bottom line goes up for everybody. We have an eviction question. So is HASS focusing on the potential of mass eviction predicted by some economists? Who wants to take this one? We've been in a lot of conversation about this topic, and I wish Chase and I was here, but Bobby, Diaz, Gina.
Well, Kristen, you've really been steering this conversation in a lot of our national calls Mondays and Fridays as well. So why don't you take this one, and maybe Diaz can chime in right after you're done.
Well, the short answer is we have so many priorities, and the more bodies and brains dedicated to this project, the better. And we had to figure out a quick funding priority. And our top priority was to get someone to focus solely on evictions and housing issues and people who are losing their homes and are in immediate crisis. So we are in the final process of hiring a person who is conducting a 6-month project to create a comprehensive, usable toolkit that can be used by anyone in any shelter to help keep people with their animals. That is not a simple project, and what we need is something that every intake staff member, every volunteer can read and easily use. But Diaz, do you want to add anything to that?
You're muted.
I did not want Gina to be alone. It's estimated that some 30 to 40 million people are going to experience eviction over this next year just due to COVID-19 alone. We also know that the numbers of individuals between the ages of 18 and 24 getting up close to 50% of those age groups are having to move back home with their parents. The wave is definitely coming. The economy is hidden, as the poor economy has hit us tremendously, and it's only a matter of time before the domino effect takes place for those people who are pet owners. We know that as a HASS group, we've been talking on this particular committee about how we can be proactive rather than being reactive when that time comes. And we are throwing out solutions and looking at what types of partnerships are going to be necessary in all the various communities. And we hope to have like solutions, resolutions that are coming forward. That issue is not going to go away. It's going to grow, and we have to be ready for it. We can't wait for the wave to hit us.
Yeah, and I would just like to add on to that we have 3 main reasons for doing this project to begin with at all. And one of them is COVID, because we can't shelter like we used to. The second one is exactly this, the evictions. We know that there's probably going to be a 2 to 3 times increase in the number of animals and people in need in the near future. And we know that shelters have limited capacity on kennels. And so we need a program that is scalable quickly and that can be leverable up or down depending on the situation. And the third is to address the history of sheltering and kind of undo all the things that we've been living with for so long and make it better. But the evictions are a big reason why HASS needs to happen right now, is because it's the only truly scalable sheltering program out there.
So Gina, if I'm a skeptical member of the public and I'm learning about HASS and I'm also seeing in my own community, just so many people need help and I'm not really sure about this whole thing, what would you, like, you're so good at kind of explaining this and giving people direction. What would you say to someone that's like really not sure they like this whole idea? And why are we even doing this?
Gosh, we're doing it because you can't waste a crisis, first of all, right? I've heard that said so many times in the last few months. This is our opportunity to completely like flip what we do on its heads. I mean, why would a dog want to be locked up in a cage? I don't care how nice your shelter is, right? How clean it is, or how you're in, you know, your art in public places is just extraordinary. Why in the world would we want to continue doing what we've been doing for the last 100 years when we know we haven't achieved success, have we? And how do we define success? I mean, HASS doesn't even talk about no kill and live release. It talks about what's best for animals and what's best for people, and how do we work more closely with the people in our communities. I mean, yeah, the taxpayers pay their taxes, and it funds government shelters very poorly, by the way. And this is a tremendous opportunity to really show what it costs to care for animals, engage people who want to help animals because they already are, and I don't know, it's like I'm waiting for the happy ending because it's coming, and you know, 50 years from now when we're all gone, maybe some of us will still be here, but most of us won't be here. They're going to be talking about what happened in 2020, I think, and what happened to animal sheltering and animals and people. And I think other countries will be looking to what we did as a solution to solve a problem that's been going on for many, many, many years. Did I answer that?
Yeah, one of the ways in which that I think when we think about the failures of our movement, we haven't really gone to people that we're serving and asked them what they want. And one of the things that HASS aims to do is actually go to places, particularly high intake areas. Ed asked a question about sort of targeting those animals that are coming into shelters and still dying in huge numbers, pit bull dogs, chihuahuas, adult cats. And, you know, we haven't solved the problem. And while we have like possibly fewer than 2 million animals dying in shelters a year, it is still a huge number of animals. And so I think that we are at a point now where we're saying, what do people really want? They want safe neighborhoods. They want to know that animals are getting care. And they want to know that people that love their animals have the ability to keep those animals. We think that's what communities want, but we're going to be doing research, and the HASS Tier 1 shelters are going to be going into communities, high intake communities, and asking people what's really important to you when it comes to animal services, and how do you want to help? In what ways do you not want to be engaged to help as well? We imagine that most communities aren't going to want to round up dangerous dogs that if they see a dog roaming their street that's threatening people, they still want animal control or animal protection to be dealing with that. And that's reasonable. But when they see a friendly little 7-month-old dog, so many people are willing to help, or they see a litter of kittens. They just need ways to be given and engaged to assist. And all we've done to this point is say, bring it to the shelter. And that's really one of the key things that needs to change.
Yeah, and I would piggyback on that. And one of the questions earlier was a question about what people can do right now to enhance their communication with the community. And that's exactly right, Kristen, is that we need to open that door wide. We have made people be powerless in helping animals themselves because of the way that we've communicated with the public in the past. And one of the working groups, the ecosystem mapping working group, is trying to work on the Tier 1 cities, but this is something you could do in any city, is map out all the resources that exist, map out the instructions, meaning write out the instructions that of what to do. You find an animal, you find this type of animal, this is exactly what you can do to help it and help find its owner, or help nurture it if it's a little neonatal kitten, and even without using the shelter at all. And if we can package that information and have people in the community have as much institutional knowledge as we do about this, about what to do, then everybody becomes an expert on it. And if you try to Google those exact questions, there's 4 million different answers. And there's no way for a normal citizen to be able to navigate what to do. And so I think each community can create their community-owned resource guide that helps people navigate. And you know, I don't know if that's sharing in public utility notices, trying to get little pamphlets added so everybody has access to this, making that a widespread marketing plan with spending as little dollars as possible. But it's something that is desperately needed. If we can share what we know, everybody can do what we do. I know there was another question.
Can we tackle the question from Rachel?
Yeah, I sort of went at it obliquely with that last answer, but go ahead on the RTO specific.
Sure. So Rachel posted that her shelter recently partnered with Finding Rover, and they eliminated their lost and found Facebook because it was so cluttered anyway. So the question is, what other ways can the HASS approach help RTO efforts between organizations and the community? And somebody give me the hook if I talk too long. RTO has, in my opinion, a before, a beginning, and an after. So the before part is, what is the culture of your organization? Are your internal policies and procedures and practices inclined to help reunite people with their pets or keep them apart? You know, a real deep dive into your ordinances, even state laws. Do we punish the very people that we're trying to get a pet back home to? And oftentimes we do unintentionally. Are our websites easy to navigate? Do we have all of the things that Dr. Jefferson just mentioned in a actionable, easy to find format on our website, so that when someone finds that kitten at 10 o'clock at night, they can simply Google it, and they're going to get, ideally across the nation, a pretty uniform answer, so that we're not all over the charts. But are we posting the lost and found forms that people fill out and the pictures that they send? Are we putting those on our public facing websites? Are we dedicating any staff or volunteers to trying to match up all those lost and found forms? And there's, every city probably has 5 to 15 different Facebook pages. Are we utilizing things like Nextdoor in our communities? Finding Rover is a great platform. It's awesome and it works, but it only works if everybody on your team knows how to speak to it, and that every pet, that animal that leaves your shelter is registered in Finding Rover before they leave. There's a lot of great tools out there, but we have to employ all of them. And I'll quit talking in 1 second, I promise. That the after is, are we tracking our data? When someone comes in to redeem an animal from our shelter, are we asking them, how did you know your pet was here? What strategy led you to be reunified? And keeping track of that data so that we can focus the most attention on the things that work the best. So I'll stop now. I could go on forever.
There was a question about reallocating staff positions, which is do we need different kinds of staff members to do this project? And I think that relates to another question we received, which is, how do you make this work from a resource perspective? Is this really sustainable? And the answer is that none of this will be free unless one of the HASS shelters has 6 employees, and they take in about 3,000 animals a year, and they work really, really hard. They probably need volunteer support for a lot of these programs, and we all do. But some resources are needed, and a lot of the HASS shelters are investing heavily in several different areas. One is in foster care. Our shelter currently has 6 or 7 people dedicated to foster, and we're now trying to take animals directly from intake and shorten their length of stay to just an hour or 2 in the shelter versus days, so that they go directly to foster. And trying to build a model where about 80% of the animals actually live in foster, not the shelter. Another area that increased staffing and investment in volunteers is needed is in pet support call services. People need to be able to call and text the organization and actually get help, information, access to resources. They need to find out where they can get their pets spayed and neutered. By doing that, you can keep so many animals out of the shelter. We last month kept out of the 400 people that called to surrender their pet, we only took in 100 of those. We were able to help 75% of the people in a month who were planning to surrender just by providing services. And then finally, the other area where we need to allocate resources is into community support to help people keep their animals. Medical support is impossible. Even simple things like treating a urinary tract infection, for a lot of folks right now who have lost their job due to COVID, it just isn't possible. And so being able to help in that area is critical as well. But none of that is necessary. The success of the program, though, success of the HASS pilot project really depends on how much shelters commit to really taking the old ways of doing things and transforming them into new ways. And that often just involves spending money differently, not necessarily spending a lot more. Who else wants to add to that answer?
Yeah, I can add to that, Kristen. That was such a wonderful answer. And I think, as you know, I had the privilege of working in a shelter for 10 years, and it's amazing to see if you really allow your staff to untuck their capes, because truly they are very diverse superheroes that do so many things. We all know we wear so many hats. And if you look at a job spec of something that you would think is an RTO specialist or someone who is keeping families together, your staff is already so well versed in these strategies. I think we just haven't really been really strategic about showcasing the value of these. And we're also not talking about, you know, obviously we're not saying that life will be cheaper, but pets are going to have better situations. Your staff are going to have the ability to grow as professionals as well, because I know that professional development is such a critical part of keeping people happy in their jobs. We talk about such high turnover in the industry and so much stress, and you're going to let people do what they want to do, which is help pets. And I think when you allow people to really embrace the human animal bond, I mean, for me, my favorite parts of my job were not just, you know, finding a home for a pet, but that experience where a pet that had been missing for months got to be reunited with their owner that loved them so much. And it all just became possible because we provided access to communication, right? We're not empowering our community. We're not saviors. There are people that want to do good work, and we need to get out of their way and provide them the information they need to help us be successful. So I'm just so excited about all of this stuff, Kristen.
Thank you so much. And we're getting near the end of our time. We're going to ask one last question to all the panelists, but before we let you go, before we start losing people, we want to let you know that this conversation is ongoing for all levels of staff and committed volunteers. We hold calls every single Monday morning. They're held at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we will, Rory just shared the link on how to join. And on Fridays at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, there's calls for leadership level staff. These are national leaders and organizations, all of us, as well as shelter directors from around Canada, the US, and other places as well. So those calls are great places. We are having these hard conversations. And what we want you to hear today is that we want critical feedback. We will do this as a big, giant, global community, and we're going to do it all moving forward together. And we also need solutions. So we're not in a moment in history where we can just criticize or just say this isn't going to work. We have to say, how can we make this work? The animals are relying on us to do that, and the world is about to become a bit more challenging. So please continue to come, engage us, ask us hard questions, and help us figure it out, because we really need your help to get these answers. Before we let everyone go, we just want to ask the executive committee members, 5 years from now, what does HASS look like? One at a time, go.
It'll just be the way things are. It'll be the normal. We won't even remember what it's like pre-COVID. It'll just be the way we are, the way we do business.
I think that we will be operating in an industry where every single person is valued and the work they do is valued appropriately for what we're doing for animals, for what every single person is doing for animals, no matter where they sit in a shelter or outside a shelter. And the animals are getting the care they need. They're not considered disposable anymore. And we have a system that makes that work, and it's working.
We're going to be in a place where we really take in all the cultural considerations and have a real understanding of how to talk to pet owners, whether they are from lower socioeconomic status or various neighborhoods, different ethnic backgrounds, and really understanding how to speak the language of everyone, bringing us all together.
My hope is in 5 years, we're really going to be able to tell the stories. I think we are an industry of storytellers, and I think we tell such a small part of the story of what shelters really do and how important they are to our community. And so I think with the data that we're tracking, with the conversations that we're having, we're going to be able to show the whole world, not just our industry, but other sectors, other divisions, departments within cities, other stakeholders and leaders, how hard you all work, how invested you are all in this mission, and how together we're going to make a better place for people and animals. So just so excited.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone. We want to also thank Maddie's Fund for all their support of this program and all of our other funders and people supporting this project, all of the working group leads and all of the HASS shelters who are being incredibly brave in one of the most challenging moments of our lifetimes, if not the most. So we are excited to move forward. We're excited to work with you, and thanks so much to everyone who was here today. And we'll see you again soon. We're going to do these more regularly. So everybody have a great day. And Bobby will share the link of, if you're not already involved, he'll reshare the link of how to get involved with HASS. Thanks so much, everyone.